Hey, it's Warren here at the Kitchen Classroom, and we're doing an updated version of a classic holiday dish, the green bean casserole. I don't know if anyone really likes that dish anymore, maybe if you've been eating it since you were a kid, but the idea of frozen green beans and canned soup and prepackaged fried onions isn't as exciting to me as maybe it was back in the day, but we want to hit those flavors and get something people will recognize but have a nice modern updated feel to it. So we're doing a little pan version of that. So we have some green beans here, these are haricot vert. I like the fancy green beans, but it'll work fine with regular green beans. We trimmed the ends and cut them in half so they're about, inch, 2 inches long. They could be a little longer, a little shorter, personal preference on that. And we blanched them in boiling water for about 5-6 minutes. I do want them tender, not crisp. This isn't blanching for like a salad, but I also don't want them mushy or overcooked. They're not gonna cook a ton in the pan, so we do want to do most of the cooking ahead in the blanching process. Then we have a mix of mushrooms. Some people use the term wild mushrooms. These are obviously all farm raised, but we have some oyster mushrooms. We have some white beech mushrooms and some brown beech mushrooms. You can do just regular button mushrooms with this, but you can get a little more character out of the mix of mushrooms, different textures, different shapes. I just sort of pulled these apart so that they're not big round pieces. When I'm doing something where the main part of my dish is long and skinny, I often try to make everything else long and skinny so that it matches together and eats well. And then we have some sliced shallot, again, long thin slice on the shallot. Want to have that so it sort of drapes and blends in with the green beans and the mushrooms. We have a cast iron skillet, that's getting pretty hot. So we're gonna add a good bit of oil to that, give that a few seconds to heat up. Then we're gonna go in with most, but maybe not all our mushrooms. Definitely don't want to overcrowd the pan. A few more in there. Now, while that starts to cook, we also have some dry vermouth, some chicken stock, though you could of course use veggie stock, heavy cream, got some salt and pepper, a little flour, because we're gonna use that for thickening down the road, a little thyme, this is dried, but you could use fresh, a little minced garlic, and some butter. And then over in this pan, we're gonna get going, we're gonna toast some breadcrumbs. Give a little texture and color to the top, a little crunch, a little of that toasty bready note. Obviously, if you want to do something like fried onions or shallots, that would be great as well. Sort of take that onion thing, give them a little stir here. See that starting to get a little bit of color on some of them. These are gonna take probably 7 or 8 minutes total to cook. Once they get sort of 2/3 done, we're gonna add in the rest. Now that this is starting to warm up, we're gonna add in some butter to that to toast our breadcrumbs in. We're using a panko breadcrumb today, but you could use regular breadcrumb or fresh bread that you toast and fry off. And the last thing we're gonna add in, this is a little pecorino romano. Parmesan would work great too. We're just gonna use about 2 tablespoons. It'll help give a little extra umami, a little extra brightness to the dish, and also tighten up the sauce at the end. Giving our mushrooms a stir. Don't need to stir them too much, just want to get them so we get a little color on different sides. The center's a little hotter, and we got these sort of wilted a bit, so we can go in with the rest of our mushrooms. Now, one of my keys to cooking mushrooms is high heat, enough oil. You don't want to go light. Mushrooms do have a tendency to absorb a good bit, and no salt. This will allow the steam to come out without drawing out too much moisture and start getting us that browning. If you salt your mushrooms, as soon as you put them in the pan, a lot of the moisture in the mushrooms comes out and you sort of steam them instead of browning them. So, looks like if those new mushrooms need to add a little bit more oil. Whatever your favorite cooking oil is fine. We don't want to use butter for this step because the butter will burn at this level of heat and this amount of time on the heat. So, cooking oil, canola, vegetable, soybean, peanut, olive oil, whatever you like. Our butter's pretty much melted over here. Give that a little swirl, and we're gonna go in with our breadcrumbs. For the first couple of minutes, you don't really need to stir these too much. It's gonna take a while for the breadcrumbs to sort of heat up. We just basically cooled off the pan and the butter with that. But we definitely wanna watch those so we don't burn them. Yep, starting to get some nice color on these. And you see them softening up. There's a nice browning on especially the big pieces of the oyster mushroom. These need another couple of minutes though. We want to get a good level of caramelization all over them. Stir, start distributing that butter around onto all the breadcrumbs. Help give a little pan, a little shimmy too, that'll even things out. Now we're gonna check back on our mushrooms. Now we're not baking this is all just being done in the pan. Except for that mushroom's going in the trash. Now we see this great color we've gotten on some of these. They've gotten nice and tender. So they're gonna keep cooking, but we're gonna go in with our shallot. And now we're gonna give that a good pinch of salt so they can start cooking. The salt will help pull the moisture out of the onion, start getting it cooking a little faster, and obviously start seasoning the dish. Great time, starting to get a little color on the breadcrumbs, which is great. Definitely don't want to forget about those. Easy thing when multitasking, forget about the less important or the easier one. So, you may notice I'm not just constantly stirring. I find a lot in the classes that people have a tendency, if they're standing in front of the stove, just to keep stirring and stirring and stirring, because I guess it's something to do. But stirring slows down cooking, and sometimes when you're whisking a nice cream sauce, you want to stir constantly so that you're constantly moving it around, keeping it from burning and sticking. But when you want caramelization, you want browning, you need to let it get on some heat and cook. So we don't want to constantly stir. At this point, we would be slowing down the cooking process, inhibiting any browning. We want to give it some time to do its thing, and then stir occasionally. All right, now we're going to go in with some butter. Check our breadcrumbs. Yep, those are getting nicely toasted, getting close there. We'll go a little darker than that. With our butter, we're gonna add in some garlic and some dried thyme. I'm gonna give these about a minute to cook, and we're gonna turn our heat down just a touch. Not forgetting about the breadcrumbs. Now we're gonna go in with our flour. This is basically making a roux, but in the pan. You get a little thickening there, so we're gonna cook this for about a minute. Good stir to get everything coated and get that flour start getting on the heat. Check my burner. Yep, still on. These need about another minute. Now we just need to cook the flour enough so it doesn't have that raw taste to it. Not trying to brown the flour at all, just want a really lightly cooked flour, light roux, so we can get a lot of thickening power from it. That's looking good. We're gonna turn that off and they can just live right there. Now we're coming in with our dry white vermouth. We use that to deglaze. We get a nice herbal flavor from the vermouth. My favorite cooking wine is dry vermouth, but any dry white wine would work just fine for this as well if you don't want to go buy vermouth just for this. But if you do like a cocktail at home, dry vermouths are great. Versatile, use it for cooking, use it in your cocktails. We're just making sure we scrape up all the bits that were stuck so we don't have any flour or any other stuck bits down there. Getting some thickening, getting some evaporation. Looking good. Now we're gonna go in with our heavy cream. And we're And still leave it on this sort of high heat because the cream, heavy cream is nearly indestructible, and it's gonna come up to a nice simmer here really quickly. While that's going, give it a little pinch of salt, knowing we added a bunch of stuff, and a good pinch of black pepper as well. Pan's still warm, so you still want to give these an occasional stir, at least once or twice. See how nicely brown these are, really golden to dark brown. Now, before we add the green beans, we want to make sure this is well seasoned. So we're going to grab a tasting spoon, give that a little taste. You can take a pinch more salt and pepper. Want a little heavy season just because the green beans are going to take up some of that salt. Now we're going to go in with the green beans. We want to get these well stirred in, mixed in. Now at this point, we're probably going to cook it for about 5 more minutes. This will get the green beans warmed through, get a little additional cooking on them, and give it time for our sauce to reduce and thicken up. Just sort of evening everything out. Once that's starting to happen, we're going to add in some of this pecorino. I'm just looking about 2 tablespoons. You could, I prefer you to grate your own, but if you use the shredded stuff, I guess I'm not there to judge. Okay, a little more flavor, a little umami, and it'll help tighten up the sauce a little bit. Not trying to make it taste like pecorino too much, so we don't need to do a ton. Another couple of minutes. If you want to do this ahead of time, if you're going to serve this dish, say on your Thanksgiving table, and didn't want to spit here and do it up until the last minute, this is about where you'd stop. At this point, you can let it cool off. Once it's fully cooled, top it with your breadcrumbs, and then put it back in the oven for 15-20 minutes just to warm through and get nice and bubbly again. You could also take it from this stage and move it into a container and put it away for a couple days, and then come back, put it in a casserole dish, and bake it off that way. The bulk of the cooking's been done, so at that point we'd just be heating things through. So we want to see we got another minute or two where the sauce doesn't really fully take back up that space when we stir through. So another 2-3 minutes. Giving all our flavors a chance to marry. Now you can see in the dish here, the bubbles starting to stack on top of each other, getting really all over the place all at once. You can tell that's really starting to get thick, not just a loose errant bubble. You can see much slower filling in the gaps. We know when we turn this off and let it sit for a couple of minutes, because you know this is way too hot to eat, then it's going to thicken up a little bit just by cooling down, so that's going to also help. So another minute or so, we're going to finish it off. Getting our breadcrumbs. We'll put a little seasoning on our breadcrumbs. Meant to do that earlier, but it'll be fine. The butter's still in there. Now we're just going to gently sort of shake these over. And that's the dish. Definitely want to let this sit for a couple minutes before taking it to the table, but you could serve it just like it is out of this nice cast iron skillet, or say before you put the breadcrumbs on, transfer it to a different dish, nice baking dish or that. Let it chill, do it day ahead, it'll be fine. Just top it to the breadcrumbs right before it goes in the oven to heat up, and you'll be good to go.